Hello, I'm Edward Hudgens.
And I'm Will Thomas.
And this is the Atlas Society State of the Culture Updates. Today's topic is the private sector in space. Now, Will, the reason why objectivists are so excited about space ventures is that they are incredible achievements and triumphs that prove the efficacy of human reason. Further, they're creating in space, off-world, another area, another realm for human freedom and achievement. And a recent, soon-to-be released study for NASA by Robert Bigelow, who's the founder of Bigelow Aerospace, documents the private sector projects that are coming online, including a private moon base, private launches, and even passenger travel into space. And Bigelow himself has a contract with NASA now to test one of his innovative inflatable habitat modules on the International Space Station. What he hopes to do is use these modules for private space station and for moon bases. And he hopes to have SpaceX, which was founded by Elon Musk, launch these into orbit in the future. So what we have now is, instead of NASA building big, expensive, costly, overpriced hardware, they're buying services from the private sector. This is a good thing.
Well, Ed, I'd agree that when a sclerotic bureaucracy that spent billions launching just one space shuttle starts contracting out to the private sector for off-the-shelf products, that's a big step forward for NASA, and it makes the government program more efficient. But there's been a lot of talk for some time among liberty-loving people about the prospects for a truly private space industry. And a truly private space industry is something we as objectivists particularly think is important, because if you have some function like space exploration that isn't really one of the proper functions of government, government doesn't have any business in it and can't provide it effectively or efficiently or even properly. And so while we can look at something like the International Space Station or the Space Shuttle and say, wow, that's impressive, on the other hand, we have no idea if it's really effective, efficient, serving human life and human purposes, doing what objectivists think achievement in the end consists in. And frankly, Bigelow and SpaceX are doing most of their work for the government so far. They're flying to the International Space Station or getting contracts with NASA. And one of the really private activities, Virgin Galactic's suborbital Spaceship Two, has barely gotten into any kind of testing and isn't really ready to fly. So I think it doesn't really look like the private space sector is really developing. Instead, the Crony Capitalist space sector is what's developing.
I mean, Will, these are good caveats, but you got to remember something. For example, in the early days of civil aviation, the post office, rather than building its own planes and hiring its own pilots, simply contracted out to private providers and pilots, like Charles Lindbergh, by the way. And this was just one element that eventually led to a huge and profitable private civil aviation sector. So I think in the future, you have to assume that this is the sort of thing that will happen with private companies that'll start with government contracts, but eventually build infrastructure into space that's private. But the other important thing is this. The Bigelow report makes an important paradigm shift, and that is space is a place, not a government program, a place that is best developed by private pioneers, just the way the American West was.
Well, Ed, I certainly hope that these new steps by NASA are the harbinger of a truly private space industry. And I think actually we can look forward for the next year and into 2014 to look for a couple very concrete signs that a real private space industry is really starting. And one of those is Virgin Galactic. Are they going to finish proving out their Spaceship Two and get it authorized to fly regularly and start regularly flying private space passengers on short flights to space? That would be a big step forward for private space industry if that really happens. And SpaceX, they've got a huge order book of private satellites that want to be launched by them. They need to get a steady rhythm going of launching those private satellites and launching them quickly and often. So we're hearing about SpaceX launching private satellites every couple months instead of launching to the space station every half year. That will be and could come in the next year or so, if that comes, that will be the sign of a big breakthrough in private space.
And let's hope that that's what we see in the future for the final frontier. This has been an Atlas Society State of the Culture update, and we thank you for listening.